Welcome to another video on Crazy Row Studios. Today we will be looking at how to do an networker upgrade from version 8.2 to 18.2 on Windows. Today we will be upgrading networker 8.2 on Windows 2008. I think let's just quickly go and see what operating system we are dealing with. Yes, it's 2008 R2. Before I go ahead with the upgrade, I would like to show you through the different the configuration that I have at present. I have deliberately created a few hundred groups to show you how exactly these groups get converted into workflows and policies once the upgrade is completed. I do have a few clients, which are all dummy clients to be honest, uh, one device and a few pools. I also do have a special group in here which is backing up only indexes. Let me just quickly show that group to you as well. So this group is index and backup. Just show you here. This is index only. All right. So this is what the current configuration looks like. So let's go ahead and try and upgrade this environment and see what are the changes that take place after the upgrade so that it is helpful to you to understand and plan your networker upgrade on the Windows environment. There are a few configurations that are supported on 8.2 which are not supported on 9.1. One of the main configuration is the support for savepnpc. If you are using savepnpc, I would recommend you to convert it to the pre and the post command before you do the upgradation so that your upgrade goes smoothly and the applications that are dependent on the savepnpc are work smoothly even after the upgrade. So essentially, the savepnpc has to contains or the savepnpc script contains both the pre and the post command. Now on the client side, you will have to break the pre and post into different scripts. Both the scripts have to start with the tag or with the name NSR so that it is taken considered here, and make sure that both the scripts are placed within the bin directory of your networker. The other factor that I wanted you to keep in mind is if in case you are using the VBA appliance in your networker environment. The VBA version supporting 8.2 does not support the version 9.x and onwards, so it has to be upgraded. And this upgrade has to be done when the networker is upgraded. You cannot do it before the upgrade itself because the version that supports 9.x and above does not support 8.2. So the upgrade of VBA appliance and the respective VBA proxies has to be scheduled during the upgrade of the networker server itself. So please plan this well in advance so that you do not run into any other issues. Another factor is also related to the virtual VM image level backups using VADP now. And if in case you're using VADP in your environment, the proxy hosts that are required for VADP backups are supported only up to 9.1. If in case you are upgrading your entire environment to 18.2, make sure that you do not upgrade the VADP proxies to more than 9.1, and I would suggest you to keep it. Once the upgrade to 18.2 is done, introduce the networker vproxies and configure your VM image level backups using the vproxies. So preparing for the upgrade, you can go ahead and stop the services. So once the services are stopped, I would also recommend you to make a copy of the RES and the folder. So index not very mandatory. If you want, you can keep it, but the index is usually a very huge database, and it's not a showstopper if in case you do have a issue with your upgrade. So but these two files or folders are important if in case you want to revert back. So make sure that you make a copy of these two files, and you would also want to make a copy of the CST folder because it contains configuration related to your NMC integration with AD. So if you want to do an integration with AD after the upgrade as well, you would need that information in there. As we wait for the services to be stopped, I would like to show you the difference between the installation files on versions prior to 9 and with versions from 9 and onwards. Let me quickly go here, and this is 824. So you would see that the installation files are actually pretty different from how it was on 8.2. So earlier we just had one installation file which was called NetWorker. So these are all the supporting files. And this was supposed to be run even though we had to install a client or a storage node or an NMC or whichever role we had to install, we always had to copy the entire folder. But going forward with 9.0 and up, the installation files have been split. The networker installation file is still the master file, which means that you can use this particular installation file to install the client, storage node, server, NMC, and so on. But in case you want to install only the client, then you just have to copy these smaller files. So if you compare the size, they are actually much smaller and really easy to copy over in case you want to install just a client. All right. So we have stopped the services. Let's go ahead and close this to avoid confusion. And let's go ahead and upgrade the NetWorker server. I'm going to run the master installer package here. Say yes. The installation is initiated. This is the EULA. Agree the EULA. Recommended to keep it as do not configure Windows Firewall. So now if you see here, it has already selected the server client role and the network management console by default because it has already found that these two roles were present on this system, and they did continue to upgrade, or they did choose to upgrade these two roles for us. So let's go ahead and click on next. So this is a notice about the change in licensing. So there are the licensing on Networker 9 is a file-based licensing, which means that you would have to go back to EMC with your enabler licenses or enabler codes and get them converted to the appropriate licensing file. Next is the configuration of authentication service. So this is something new with version 9.x and above. And this particular service is now responsible for all your authentication needs within Networker. Earlier this particular service was not present, so this is about the configuration. The default port is 1990. So again, this particular service is Apache based. It's a web service, and you will see how it is used later in this video. So this is the default port. Let's click on next. So this needs a keystore password. Keystore password is to encrypt your authentication service lockbox, and this would be required next time when you upgrade your networker server, because the authentication service, every time it is upgraded, it needs configuration again. And when you do run the configuration script that is inbuilt within the installation wizard itself, it is going to ask you for the earlier password, and you would have to provide it there. For people who are worried about forgetting this password, even though if you forget this password, it's not a big issue. The only issue is that all the trust that were established with other Authy service would be lost in case of renaming or creating a new lockbox, and you would have to establish the trust again. Let's go ahead and click on next, the initial password. So again, as I told you, the authentication service is something new, and it takes care of all the authentication needs within NetWorker. And earlier we used to create the users on the Networker Management Console, so authentication was also managed by the Networker Management Console. But going forward with 9.x onwards, this service is taken over by the OTC, which always runs on the backup server. So the password that you are giving here is the initial password for your administrator user, and this is the password that you would need to log in into the Networker Management Console. All right, once that is set, please do remember the passwords that you put in here. Next is the options for the NMC. So again, it's about talking about putting the location for your Network Management Console files. It also asks which authentication service you want to use. So if in case you have multiple backup servers in your environment, you can provide any one of those systems as authentication service. Or as a best practice, if you have a centralized NMC, it is best to install the authentication service on the same system and use the same authentication server as its authentication service host. So here you'd provide the host of the authentication, so host name of the authentication server. In our case, it is itself, and then the authentication port, which we saw in the earlier configuration page as well. Next is the client and service port for the NMC, which has always been 9000 and 9001. Now, if in case you have been using an earlier NMC on 8.2, it is going to ask you if you want to upgrade that database. It can be a case wherein you use the Networker Management Console server's report functionality every now and then, and you would want to hold on to those reports. In such a case, you would want to migrate the existing database to the new database. So the NMC is now going to run on PostgreSQL. If you want to do it manually, you could do it manually, which is by using the GSAN unload option. But if you do want it, I would recommend to go with the second option. And if in case you do not want any of the earlier configuration, you can just skip the migration and create a new one. So I'm just going to select migrate the database automatically and click on upgrade. Just wait for the installation process to complete, or the upgrade process to complete. While we wait for the installation to complete, I also wanted to tell you about an important change in the certificate authority that DMC has been using. So that has changed, because of which, if in case you are using NetWorker on an isolated server, which means that it does not have access to the internet, then you would need to install the certificate that is required for the version 18.2 manually. So the link to the KB article describing this issue, and also a link to the certificate, will be put on the description. Please take a note and make sure that the certificate is installed before you go ahead with the upgrade. So the installation is almost complete now. You see it's trying to start the services. So the upgrade is completed successfully. Let's click on finish. Check if the services are running. First, let's go ahead and check the version on the program manager. So you see we have NetWorker and it's on version 8203. Before I launch the NMC, I would also like to talk to you about the NRE, which is the NetWorker Runtime Environment. This is a very handy tool, and I would suggest you to install this NRE on the management server wherever you, whichever you are using to connect to the NMC. So I'll just go through the installation of the NRE as well. It's quite simple. So the NRE actually contains the Java runtime environment bundled within it, and it also creates a shortcut that helps you to launch the NMC easily. So that is very helpful, and since it is coming from EMC, it always has the correct version of Java that is required for NetWorker to work properly. So let's continue with the installation. So that's finished. Great. So once the installation is finished, you will see this particular shortcut from the NRE, which is the NMC launcher on the desktop. So let's go ahead and try to launch our machine. Let me get the IP. This is the IP address of my backup server. So let's go ahead and put it in here. Okay. Now put in the administrative credentials. ADMINISTRTR and the password that we had set during the upgrade process. Alright, so this is our upgraded version. So let's go ahead and click on start. So when you're launching it for the first time, it is going to tell you about the migration status. So it says that the migration status has failed. So let's go ahead and look at the log. And it says that my success ratio is 94.59%. My group resources, although 105 groups were successfully migrated, the clone resource however failed. I was expecting this because they had not been configured properly, so all of them had failed. So I'm going to ignore this, but keep in mind that if in case you see any failures, you might have to go and check back on your the resource database and see if there are any differences in your configuration. So let's click on close, which is going to launch the NMC. So this is talking about those resources which were not converted. Let's go ahead into the protection. So the configuration tab is now converted into protection. The client is going to be unchanged. So these are the clients that I had. The groups is now called as the protection group, and it does not contain all the configuration that we had earlier. So we can just take a look at one of the groups. So if you see, I have all the 105 groups here, but if I go and check the index group, it is not present. So we are going to talk about that a little later. So let's go ahead and check one of the groups here. Okay, if we go to properties, you will see that there are a lot of the functions that were there earlier on the group which are now missing. So these functionalities are now divided between the workflow resource as well as the action resource. So in the group, all you can do is select the clients that are to be backed up. So there are different kind of protection groups that we have in NetWorker now. So we are going to talk about that in the NetWorker learning video series, and we'll see what are the different groups that are available for normal file system backup and module based backup. It will be of type clients, wherein you get to select which client you want assigned to that group. So this is all the configuration that you have in groups. Looking at the policies, you will see that there are a number of policies. So these are the default policies that get created. You can straight away delete it if you do not want to use it and you want a cleaner console to administer. You can straight away delete this 3-4 policies. This is important. So the index group that we were talking about earlier is now replaced here because the server workflow itself now is responsible for taking the backup of your bootstrap as well as your indexes. So if you remember in NetWorker 8.2, after during the run of every group, an index backup was done for the clients that belong to that group. But with the current version, that is 9.2 and on, and 18.x as well, this particular feature does not exist, which means that there is no index backup which happens after every group run. So on the group or on the workflow, only the selected save set backup run. There is no bootstrap nor index backups that are run every time a workflow runs. So this needs to be configured to run at least once a day, so that you have a bootstrap backup as well as the index backup. The other important policies that have been created are the backup_1, backup_2. We have these three because we have 105 system with us, and out of the 105, one is missing because that was the index group. And each policy will have 50 groups in it. The way the groups are distributed are random. We do not have control over it. So you might have to do a reshuffling or creation of new policies to help you identify which workflow is in which group, because right now it is all mixed up and is a little crazy to understand. So these are the three policies that we created with all the groups converted into workflows. So let's go ahead and look at one of these workflows. So let's go with this here. So if you go to the properties of the workflow, the scheduling configuration is on the workflow. So here you will have an option whether to enable this workflow or not. If you want to use the auto start as well, you have an option for setting the start time, the interval of backup, and the restart window, which was earlier in the group configuration. And you do have an option to select the group. Another important thing that you have to remember here is that only one protection group can be assigned to one workflow, and one workflow can be assigned only to one group, so vice versa. So it's a one-to-one relation. You cannot have one group assigned to multiple workflows, or one workflow assigned to multiple groups. So this is part of the group configuration that has been that was there earlier in the group configuration that is now assigned to the workflow. The rest of the configuration is part of the action resource here. So let's take a look at the action resource as well. So the action resource allows you to select the schedule for a backup. So right now the only option to set the schedule is manually selecting what kind of backup you want to be done on which date. But starting with 19.2, you do have another option wherein it will allow you to assign a schedule resource, wherein you can define all your schedules to that resource and assign and assign that resource to the action. Let's click on next and see what else we have here. So this is the storage node selection. So you can select whatever storage node you want to assign to this particular workflow. There is the destination pool. So whatever destination pool you want to assign can be kept here. The client override behavior is another important factor or option that you might want to keep in mind or check after the upgrade. So here it says that it is of type legacy backup rules, which means that if there are any configurations that are done on the client, so those configurations take precedence over the options that you have selected here. For example, if you have selected a particular storage node on the client properties, then that is going to take precedence over the storage node that you're going to select here. The second thing is about the pool. So if you have selected a particular pool in your client properties, so that option takes precedence over the option that you have here, and the same goes for the retention as well. So if in case you do not want the configuration of on your client to take precedence, all you'll have to do is select client cannot override. But keep in mind that once you go out of this selection of legacy backup rules and select anything else, you will not be able to come back and change that to legacy backup rules. I'll show you that a little later. So I'll just select client cannot override. So I don't recommend doing this on your system because it has already taken the required configuration from the earlier configuration that you have and put it here. So making changes might change the behavior. So these are about the retries and the inactivity timeout and the schedule overrides. So if you have any overrides, you can apply them here. And it is also talking about the notifications. So you have notifications at the policy level, the workflow level, as well as the action level. But if you want very detailed information in the notification, it is always best to apply the notification at the action level. Okay, so all you have to do is select on completion on failure and then just put in the command as you did earlier, like mailx or nsr trap or whichever notification you want to enable. So I'm just going to stick to set this, click on next. This is the summary, and then you get to configure. So let me just quickly go back and show you about the option regarding the legacy overrides. So if I go and say next, see here you do not have the legacy option anymore. So be careful when you disable it, you won't be able to configure it again. So this is regarding how the groups have been broken up into policies, actions, and workflows. What else do we want to see here? The devices are not going to change. It is going to be as it is. So is the pools. So there were a few pools that were created earlier, and they're still here. And so that's about it. Those are the main things that you keep in mind during the change or the upgrade from 8.2 to 18.2. Another important factor that you might have to keep in mind is that to upgrade to 9.x or above, you have to be at least on the version 8.2. So if you are on a earlier version, you'll have to first upgrade to 8.2 and then only it is advisable to upgrade to 9.x and above. So this is what we have regarding the upgrade. So I hope this was very helpful to you. Thanks for staying till the end. Goodbye.